Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's episode, Frank Buckley quantifies the productivity and financial gain from dairy crossbreeding, and first outlines the fundamentals of crossbreeding that have benefited dairy herds in Ireland.
In the context of Ireland and our breeding programs, I guess it's the two biggies are breed complementarity. So that's the complementarity, I suppose, obviously between the two breeds in terms of, or at least two breeds that would be used in the program, and the various traits that their strengths or in terms of their traits. And secondly, what we call heterosis or hybrid vigor, and that's the additional performance that that's achieved when you crossbreed two unrelated breeds over and above what you expect as the average from each of those breeds. So technically it's called the additional performance over the mid-parent mean.
From the perspective of dairy breeding in Ireland, what are the typical breeds that have been used in crossbreeding efforts in the past in Ireland?
Down through the years, we have evaluated, I suppose, quite a number of breeds. If you go back to the early 90s, we would have looked at the dual-purpose breeds from France, namely the Montbeliarde and Normande. We subsequently, I suppose, fertility became, at that point, we'll say in the mid-90s, fertility became more of an issue or became more apparent in terms of its the decline in fertility, if you like, in the national population. So we began to look at breeds that have where fertility was the real strength, and that led us to the Norwegian Red, and we quite a lot of research done on those, and then subsequently the Jersey breed. And I guess our findings in summary there would be that the likes of the Jersey, the likes of the Norwegian Red, with their moderate size, early maturity, ability to perform well under grazing, are probably the breeds most suited in the context of our system. Whereas the other breeds, the breeds I mentioned there, the more dual purpose, the more late maturing breeds like the Montbeliarde, Normande, and you probably would bring in the likes of the Fleckvieh there now. They're a breed that seems to be a bit of interest in them currently. I mean, they're less compatible with our system in the sense that our system is based on 2-year-old calving, compact calving, so fertility is really important. So issues with those dual purpose breeds, you tend to have issues more around late maturity, which has consequences for fertility really in the context of our system, both in terms of having animals calving down at the appropriate time as 2-year-olds and subsequently as later on in terms of recalving. And you also have issues with more issues with calving difficulty because of the bigger nature of these animals and I say that late maturing trait.
I suppose you've identified some negatives that work against the seasonal calving system with those dual purpose breeds. So let's take a look at the Norwegian Red and the Jersey. What exactly would you see that they can deliver, from a breed complementarity and a hybrid vigor perspective?
Well, generally, both of those breeds are what we might call moderate sized. So, I mean, typically in our system, I suppose the type of animal that fits best is sort of an animal that might be 550 kilos that will produce, we hear the figure that what farmers are trying to achieve is 500 kilos of solids from a 500 kilo animal. That's aspirational, but at the end of the day, I suppose the type of animal that's probably most suited to our system is an animal that's probably 550 kilos, delivering somewhere between 450 and 550 kilos of milk solids, that will do it year on year, that will do it comfortably from pasture, that will respond in terms of supplementation at the shoulders, but it ultimately will produce the majority of that milk from grazed grass. And importantly, to achieve that, they need to conceive we'll say readily, so in other words, recover quite well post-calving, but equally they need to have the potential to calve down as 2 years of age, so they need to be early maturing. And we find with the Norwegian Red, the Jersey, the Norwegian Red is probably comparable to the black and whites, to the Holstein Friesians that we typically run through our systems. The Jersey we find is slightly earlier maturing. So in that regard, they calve down comfortably at 2 years of age. They're they have a natural ability to do that, and with little issues in terms of calving difficulty and so on. And then in terms of the size of the animal, generally, if we cross them with our black and whites, we will result in that 500 to 550 kilo type, size of animal, producing the type of production levels that we're trying to achieve. So that efficiency is there. They will deliver decent solids, and they will tend to have good fertility. So they fit those attributes, I suppose, or those characteristics that we're trying to achieve pretty well. The Jersey has an additional, if you like, I suppose both of those breeds have something slightly different to the black and white, in addition to the obvious, in the sense that the Jersey, the obvious thing is they're smaller, they have less volume, they have higher solids. But what people don't realize, I guess, in terms of the complementarity, is that the Jersey as a breed has a unique aspect in terms of its ability to eat more relative to its size. So that allows it then to have what we call a higher intake capacity. So in eating more relative to its size, it has a lower maintenance requirement to carry that smaller body weight, and has more energy, if you like, available to produce more milk. So as a consequence, they produce more milk output in terms of milk solids in our case, relative to their body size, which then feeds into an ability to have a higher stocking rate and so on, because because of the efficiencies that arise there. The Norwegian Red would be, and its cross would be similar in many respects to the Holstein Friesians that we would typically run. So again, moderate size. The pedigrees would be slightly smaller, but when you cross them, you end up with an animal that's similar. And in terms of most things, I mean, their markings can be slightly different, but from you could be crossbreeding with Norwegian Red and your neighbours won't know about it, I suppose. But they have particularly good. They've been selected very strongly for both fertility and udder health, so mastitis resistance. So they're particularly strong in that regard. And then obviously, if you're talking about the complementarity of the other breeds that I mentioned earlier, you're more interested in beef merit and issues like that. But in terms of the efficiency of milk production, the Jersey and Jersey crosses will be number one. And in the terms of the next crosses that we've evaluated, the Norwegian Red type animal would be next, and they would be comparable with the black and whites.
Farmers will take the decision to crossbreed, and would take the example of Jersey. They'll cross their black and white cows with Jersey, and they'd be particularly happy with the response in terms of the heifer they produce. Where to next after that?
100% of the heterosis that will be expressed in the first cross. So that's where you have two breeds crossing, and you have 100% expression of hybrid vigor. So there's different strategies then thereafter, and depending on where you go around the world or who you talk to, there's different strategies. And typically within dairy strategies, it's either what we call a two-way crossbreeding, so a two-way reciprocal crossbreeding rotational system, or a three-way rotational system. So in other words, you crisscross with two breeds, crisscross with three breeds in the rotation, or you have something that has emerged from the New Zealand side of things is the synthetic or crossbred bulls. So if we just stick with the two-way crossbreeding, which is using two breeds, what typically happens is in the first generation, we'll take it in our example where we might have a Holstein Friesian cow mated to a Jersey bull, we'll say. The resulting calf is, as I said, 50-50. So it's a 50% Jersey, 50% Friesian, and that will express 100% of hybrid vigor. So if we go back to what I said earlier, it can be in the region of 150 euros per cow per lactation, over and above what's expressed by the EBI, if you like. So over and above the animal's additive genetic merit. In the second generation, then, we'll assume that we come back with a Holstein Friesian bull. So we have our F1, our crossbred cow, and we made it back to a Friesian bull. The resulting progeny then is 75% Friesian and 25% Jersey. And that animal will express 50% of the hybrid vigor of the F1. So if we take the numerical figure that I used there of 150 euros per cow lactation, they'll express 75 euros per cow per lactation. And we often hear that once we move away from the first cross, we lose all the hybrid vigor. So yes, when we come back in that instance with one of the parent breeds in the next generation, yes, half the genes are now back to being what we call homozygous. They're similar. They're both of the same breed, both from the dam and the sire side. but you still have 50% of the genes that are heterozygous, and that's why we get an expression of 50% of the hybrid vigor. Thereafter, it actually increases again. So in the next generation, if we were to say we follow through with coming back to a Jersey bull on our 3/4 bred Frisian quarter Jersey cow, we result in an animal that's 37.5%, if we want to be specific, 37.5% Holstein Friesian and 62.5%. So almost 1/3, 2/3 Jersey Holstein Friesian. And that animal, in that instance, again, because of the type of genes that are then circulating, we have 75% expression of hybrid vigor. So that's coming back up to 3/4 of the 150 euros I mentioned. If we continue to crisscross in subsequent generations, we ultimately end up with animals that are either 2/3 of the parent breed and 1/3 of the other breed. So if the sire of the animal is Jersey, it's 2/3 Jersey, 1/3 Friesian. And in the next generation, because we go back to Friesian, it'll be 2/3 Friesian, 1/3 Jersey. And as a consequence, we get 2/3 of the expression of heterosis thereafter, okay, in those later generations. So assuming we stick to the plan, so we have our purebreds, we cross them, and we continue to crisscross with pure breeds. So in theory, we're saying here that these are 100% of their respective breeds. You have 100% expression of hybrid vigor in the first generation. In the next generation, we lose half of it, or we retain half of it, whichever way you want to look at it. We then come back to 75%, and thereafter it's 2/3. So we don't lose it.
And let's take the Jersey as our alternative breed for the example. Are there sufficient Jersey bulls to pick from the active bull list, where farmers are looking at having several bulls to, minimise the risk and increase the reliability of their bull team?
I mean, I suppose what I would say is that there is less Jersey bulls available, but there is more than enough. So, I mean, in Ireland, I mean, there's, I suppose, two main sources of Jersey coming into the country. One is the New Zealand through LIC predominantly, and some through Ambreed via NCBC, and then you have Viking Genetics, which are the Danish Jerseys. So I will say that our research has shown that the New Zealand Jersey bulls are more suitable to our system, and that stands to reason, I guess. They're being selected in an environment not dissimilar to our own. They tend to have the characteristics that we're looking for, this high intake capacity, this ability to convert grass into solids. And there is no doubt that it's very clear from the research that we're showing that these Jerseys coming from New Zealand, there is considerable genetic gain taking place in their breeding program because their ability to produce solids is increasing year on year, and holding their own at least with the progress that we're making in our own black and white population in that regard. They also seem to be improving in terms of fertility, and again, that goes back to changes in their own breeding program in recent times. The Danish are probably less suitable, we find, because they're less compatible with our pasture-based system. They're more, they originate from a system that's more based on high input, a TMR type diet. And in terms of the number of bulls available, there's an increasing number of quality bulls coming through, in particular, as I say, from New Zealand year on year. So yes, while it's not apparent always because they're not on the active bull list, I mean, they are available. The criteria upon which these alternative breeds appear on the active bull list is more stringent than our own bulls that are available here from our own national breeding program. So for that reason, the bulls available don't always appear on the active bull list. But if we take at the moment, I did an exercise with there recently whereby I looked at, if we took the top 6 bulls on the active bull list, which are all black and white bulls, I compared them to what would happen if we were to use the top 6 Jersey bulls that are available. The difference in EBI is quite small. So I think the difference in EBI between those teams of 6 bulls that we potentially could use is something in the region of 15 euros. So and that's actually, if I look at having conducted that exercise for a number of years, that's as close as the animals have been. So in other words, it's such is the progress that's been made in New Zealand that those Jersey bulls, in EBI terms, are quite close now to the best of the genomic tested Frisian bulls that are available in EBI. I mean, there is differences in terms of what traits are strong and weak within those breeds, but then that comes back to our complementarity and the expression of heterosis, which is not included in the EBI.
Why, Frank, is the hybrid vigor not included in the EBI? I mean, you're equating it financially to potentially a 75 to a €150 gain per cow per lactation, depending on the level of crossbreeding in the cow.
So it's not included in the EBI because it's what's known as non-additive genetic improvement. Okay, so it's as a consequence of crossbreeding. So when you have bulls on the active bull list, we don't know whether they're going to be used on pure Frisian cows, whether they're going to be used on pure Jersey cows, whether they're going to be used on crossbred cows. So we don't know the proportion of crossbred genes, if you like, that's going to be in the resulting progeny. So we have to assume, that they're all going to be used on pure populations, if you want to call it that. And that's the assumption, and that's correct, because the expression of heterosis is as a consequence of crossbreeding. And as I say, it'll depend on the proportion of crossbredness, if you like, within the resulting progeny. So for that reason, it's something that you calculate on the basis of the cross or on the basis of the resulting progeny.
And you also mentioned the use of crossbred bulls. So instead of, I suppose, crossing two pure breeds, what you're doing is you have your cow and you're crossing it to a crossbred bull. What is your take on that? And is there a role for use of crossbred bulls in Ireland?
Well, where that's coming from really is New Zealand. And in New Zealand, you have a scenario whereby, crossbreeding is the most popular breeding strategy. Over 50% of the cows in New Zealand are crossbred. And as a consequence, their breeding program is such that they identify the best Frisian bulls, the best Jersey bulls, and the best crossbred bulls. And the selection intensity is highest within their crossbreeding population because they have a greater pool of high genetic merit crossbred cows to choose from, if you like. So really what it boils down to then is you will have a reduction in heterosis. So, typically if we consider that, I suppose most people starting out on the crossbreeding regime, they will, so most people starting out on crossbreeding will tend to cross Jersey, for example, a pure breed onto their black and white cows. So they will have this 50-50, this first cross cow that expresses the 100% hybrid vigor. And I guess a lot of them then want to sort of retain that type of an animal. So they will say, right, by using an F1 bull or a crossbred bull, the resulting calves again will be 50-50, if you like, in terms of Jersey and black and white, and maintain a lot of the characteristics of the first cross. But the reality is, in that situation, you because you are coming back with genes from both parent breeds, if you like, the level of heterosis being expressed again will be on average about 50%. And if you go with a crossbred bull again in the next generation, similarly, the expression of heterosis will be 50%. So it's lower. The expression of heterosis then, in effect, or in practical terms, is lower than if you were crisscrossing with two breeds or three breeds. So heterosis is expressed more in the strategies where you use the pure breeds. But on the other hand, because of the selection intensity of these bulls in New Zealand, they have a big pool of high genetic merit crossbred cows to select from. They will be on average, or can be on average, of superior additive genetic merit. So as expressed in their breeding work or in our EBI.
I suppose the biggest drawback people would see to crossbreeding in Ireland would be, you have a 50-50 chance of the bull calf and also then the value of your cull cow. Has sex semen totally eliminated that concern?
The bull calf is a concern for sure. Look, we can't ignore that. And the cull cow to a lesser extent. But I suppose that the way we would look at it from if we just take, first of all, this beef merit or this or the bull calf from an economic point of view, it's a very, very small percentage of a dairy farmer's income, and for that reason, will be overshadowed by the benefits coming through in terms of fertility, productivity, stocking rate, and so on. Because many of these crossbred herds, the productivity, having introduced the Jersey and introduced the characteristics that the Jersey delivers, the output can be as high as 10% more from those farms, which obviously has huge implications for profitability. But there is the issue of the lack of demand of these lower value animals, and this is an issue that many are not prepared to contend with. So I mean, look, sex semen will certainly minimise that, and thankfully, the majority of Jersey and Kiwi crossbred bulls that are available sexed. It seems to be working pretty well, given the fertility of these crossbred animals. They tend to be inherently more fertile, so that lends itself to using sex semen.
And finally, Frank, dairy farmers are finalising their bull teams over the coming weeks, regardless of breed, and taking into account our, moderate input grass-based systems. What are the important traits that you think farmers should really focus on to produce a suitable cow for future production systems in Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, whether we're crossbreeding or whether we're working within the black and white population, I think we can't lose sight of the basic components that are required, for success in our system. And ultimately we're looking for high solids output, but we're looking for, it's seasonal production at the end of the day. So we need to have fertility. So we want, moderate sized cows, I would suggest, 550 kilos approximately body weight, which is equivalent to a maintenance figure of around 15. So, that size animal that's capable of producing high solids. And I tend to look at the kilos of fat and protein as opposed to the volume. People often get hung up on low, milk figures, whether that be, borderline positives or negatives. I tend not to look at that. I like to see animals that are relatively modest in their increase of milk, but that I look for, high kilos of fat and protein, and coming from high percentages.
That's great. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to Frank Buckley for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.